On September 24, 1869, the U.S. gold market collapsed in 4 hours, and the two men who triggered it walked away richer. The standard account is straightforward. Gould and Jim Fisk were robber barons. They cornered the gold market through sheer greed and market manipulation. When the scheme unraveled, they'd made millions while ordinary Americans lost their savings. The government stepped in. Justice prevailed. This is what every textbook teaches. It's also incomplete. Start with who they were. Gould, thin, intense, methodical, had already built a railroad fortune through cutthroat consolidation. Jim Fisk was his opposite, loud, theatrical, a performer who wore his wealth like costume jewelry. By 1869, they controlled the Erie Railroad together. It was a partnership of calculation and showmanship. The gold market in 1869 was a closed ecosystem. The U.S. had recently returned to the gold standard after the Civil War. The Treasury held gold, banks held gold, speculators bought and sold futures contracts on gold they'd never see. It was the only truly liquid commodity market in America. In the spring of 1869, Gould and Fisk began accumulating gold contracts. Quietly, methodically, they bought through proxies, shell companies, and trusted brokers. By July, they held roughly $60 million worth, an enormous position for a market that had never seen coordinated speculation at this scale. But they needed help from above, specifically from the White House. President Ulysses S. Grant's administration held the key, the Treasury's gold supply. If Treasury Secretary George Boutwell kept selling gold to stabilize the market, Gould's corner would collapse. So Gould did what any rational monopolist would do. He cultivated the president. Gould met with Grant multiple times that summer. He was polite, deferential. He hinted that keeping gold off the market would actually prevent inflation, a respectable economic argument, even if it was a lie. He suggested that Treasury restraint would help farmers by raising crop prices. Grant, a soldier, not an economist, listened. By September, Gould believed he had Grant's assurance, no gold sales. The price began to rise, $50 per ounce, then $130. Speculators who'd bet against him were drowning. Banks that had sold gold short faced ruin. The broader market, stocks, bonds, currency, began to seize up. Then Grant moved. On September 23rd, the day before the crash, the president ordered Boutwell to sell Treasury gold. Massive quantities. Immediately, Grant had realized he'd been played. Gould's promises about farmer welfare were theater. The corner was pure manipulation. September 24th, Black Friday, Boutwell dumped gold into the market, prices collapsed. The gold market seized, brokers couldn't settle contracts, banks failed, stock markets crashed in sympathy, fortunes evaporated in hours. The panic rippled through the entire economy, and here's where the standard story breaks down. Gould and Fisk didn't go to prison, they didn't even face serious criminal charges. Fisk was briefly arrested, then released on bail. Gould was never charged at all. Instead, they settled their contracts at favorable rates. They made millions, they walked away. Why? Because the law didn't prohibit what they'd done. Market manipulation wasn't illegal in 1869. Cornering a commodity was aggressive, not criminal. And Gould had been careful. His conversations with Grant were never explicit promises. They were hints, suggestions, the deniable language of power. The real story isn't about two men breaking the law. It's about the law not existing. It's about a market with no circuit breakers, no position limits, no transparency. It's about an administration naive enough to be manipulated by a clever financier. And it's about the absence of any framework to punish what we'd now call fraud. The panic of 1869 didn't destroy Gould. He went on to control the Union Pacific Railroad. He became one of the wealthiest men in America. Fisk was murdered in 1872, shot by a business rival over a woman, not over gold. His death was unrelated to the conspiracy that made him famous. What changed after Black Friday was architecture, not accountability. Congress eventually passed laws against market manipulation. The Sherman Antitrust Act came in 1890. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913 to stabilize the money supply. Regulations accumulated slowly in response to each crisis. But the mechanism remained the same. A clever operator identifies an information asymmetry, cultivates access to power, makes it profitable for decision-makers to look the other way, then profits from the collapse when reality reasserts itself. Gould didn't invent this, he just executed it perfectly. The 1869 Gould Corner was the first of its kind in America. It wouldn't be the last. Every major market crash since 1929, 1987, 2008 has contained the same elements: asymmetric information, regulatory gaps, and operators smart enough to exploit both before anyone notices. What Gould and Fisk actually proved wasn't that rich men are greedy. It was that markets without rules are arenas where information and access become weapons. The gold panic of 1869 taught regulators a lesson they are still learning. You can't write laws fast enough to stop the next scheme. You can only build systems that make schemes harder to hide. Gould died in 1892, still wealthy, still respected in certain circles. His legacy was the railroad, not the Gould Corner. History remembers him as a robber baron, which is accurate but incomplete. He was also a man who understood that rules are written after the crime, never before it. Subscribe for the next financial conspiracy, where the rules were written, but the players found the loopholes anyway.